Hey, tonight we're not going to the south of France. We're not seeking the warmth of the Riviera or the scent of lavender fields. We're going to Boston, to a city of brick and ambition where history isn't just in books, it's under your feet, etched into the cobblestones and whispering from the slate rooftops. Imagine standing outside a Venetian palace on a cold March night. The year is 1990. The city's alive, thrumming with the manic, joyous energy of St. Patrick's Day, a river of green and laughter flowing a few miles away through the narrow streets of Southie. But here, on the edge of the fens, it's quiet. A reverent, almost sacred quiet. You can hear the rain, a soft, persistent tapping on the glass roof of the courtyard inside, a sound like 1,000 tiny fingers drumming in anticipation. And maybe, just maybe, if you hold your breath, you can hear the faintest sound of a police officer's shoes on wet pavement, coming a little too close, their rhythmic slap a metronome counting down to a moment of profound violation. Somewhere in that palace, a young security guard named Rick Abath is at his desk. He's not a criminal. He's not a mastermind or a hardened tough. He's a musician in a rock band, a guy with long hair who probably thinks more about guitar riffs and late-night gigs than he does about priceless works of art. But tonight, he's the keeper of a $500 million treasure, a collection so vast and eclectic, it represents one woman's defiant soul captured in oil, canvas, and stone. And he's about to open the door to a ghost story. The men who will enter aren't here for a routine check. They are not emissaries of the law. They are here to create the most famous empty spaces in the world, to perform a kind of reverse alchemy, turning priceless masterpieces back into mere memory and whispered legend. You probably wouldn't last 5 minutes on their crew, not because of the physical danger, but because of the incredible, maddening audacity you'd have to find inside yourself. The sheer, breathtaking nerve required to walk into a temple of beauty and culture and treat it like a warehouse, to slash a Rembrandt from its frame and roll it up like a cheap poster. So before we get started, take a second to settle in. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from tonight, what small corner of the world you're occupying. Dim your screen. Let your body grow heavy, sink into your chair or your bed. Let the sounds of your own world fade into the background. And let's walk into the silence of this thing together, into the heart of a heist that became a myth, a crime that became a work of art in its own right. The museum smells faintly of floor polish and old paper, a combination of diligent maintenance and inevitable decay. It's the scent of preserved time. A cheap space heater in the security office pushes warm, dry air around, making the dust motes dance like little ghosts in the glow of the monitors. They spin and twirl in the pixelated light, tiny, forgotten particles of skin and fabric and history. Rick Abath leans back in his chair, the worn vinyl groaning under his weight. One hand holds a half-empty cup of coffee, the styrofoam warm against his fingers. The other rests on the console, a silent sentinel. He doesn't drink much coffee anymore on the late shift. It makes the silence too loud, the shadows too active. But tonight, the ritual matters. The warmth, the bitter taste, it's an anchor in the long, dark hours. Boston, outside the museum walls, is a slow-moving river of green light and fading celebration. The last of the revelers are stumbling home, their songs dissolving into the damp night air. The city, famous for its revolutionary spirit and its unforgiving winters, hums with a strange kind of peace. The kind of peace that only follows a citywide party, an exhausted, contented sigh. But Rick knows better. He knows the city's rhythms. It's not peace. It's just tired. And in the quiet spaces left behind by the noise, other things can begin to move. He's 23 years old, an age where the future feels both infinite and impossibly distant. But tonight, under the weight of a responsibility so vast it feels like a memory from a life he hasn't lived yet, he feels timeless. The air in the small office holds a kind of pressure, a low barometric hum, like a secret that's about to break. Not loudly, not with a crash or a scream, but with that quiet, unsatisfying click of a door being buzzed open when it should have stayed shut for eternity.
Behind him, the door to the palace proper creaks. His partner on the shift, another young man, just as out of place in this world of priceless artifacts, makes his rounds. He's tired in a way that settles deep in the bones, a weariness born of boredom and low stakes. All quiet, he says, his voice a low murmur that barely disturbs the air. It's the same thing he says every hour, a mantra against the encroaching darkness. Rick nods, his eyes fixed on the bank of monitors. He doesn't turn from them. The screens show empty hallways, galleries filled with sleeping masterpieces. A Vermeer here, a Manet there. Each screen a window into a silent, perfect world. The black and white, low-resolution images flatten the vibrant colors, turning the priceless art into ghostly afterimages, pale phantoms waiting in the dark. Inside those galleries, a collection of art waits. Not just paintings. There are tapestries that depict ancient battles. There are woven threads holding the ghosts of long-dead kings. There are sculptures, furniture, personal letters from famous artists. It's not a collection from Boston. It's from everywhere. Venice, Amsterdam, Paris. Each piece carries with it rough histories, harder stories of war, theft, and survival. They hang in rooms carefully arranged, not by art historians with an eye for chronology or school, but by the woman who bought them, a force of nature named Isabella Stewart Gardner. She treated each piece not like an investment to be locked away, but like a guest in her home, a personality to be engaged with. They're not here for public viewing tonight. They are here to see if two young men, armed with a few monitors and a walkie-talkie, can keep the entire world out. This was the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum, the life's work of a woman born from immense wealth and a deep, gnawing boredom with the ordinary strictures of her time. She built this palace, a piece of Venice transplanted to the Boston Fens, and ruled her collection not like a curator, but like a meticulous, eccentric host who hated empty spaces and dull conversations. Her will stipulated that nothing in the collection could ever be changed, moved, or sold. Each object was to remain in its place forever, creating a permanent, unchanging work of art that was the museum itself. She was about to have that precision, that obsessive control violated in the most profound and irreversible way. The silence she had so carefully curated, a silence meant to be filled with awe and contemplation, now wraps around the two young guards like a threat. It's a heavy, listening silence. The night is brief, whispered. They discuss the patrol route, the notoriously finicky motion detectors in the Dutch room, the schedule for the next morning's staff, a missing piece of equipment from a supplier who never delivered, the mundane operational chatter of any workplace, strangely juxtaposed with the monumental value of the assets they are protecting. Rick listens more than he speaks. His fingers tap a slow, steady rhythm on the desk, a beat only he can hear, his own, a song forming in his head, a counter-narrative to the oppressive quiet. "We should check the blue room again," his partner says, his voice a low murmur, edged with a faint, unfounded anxiety. "I thought I heard something, a scrape." Rick looks up, finally. His eyes, accustomed to the dim glow, seem to hold all the shadows of the room. "Neither of us leaves the desk alone," he says, his voice flat and steady. "Rules are rules." It's the first line of defense, the thin wall of procedure that separates order from chaos. There's a pause. Not a challenge, not a moment of insubordination, just the sound of two professionals recalculating the odds around a new, imagined variable. This guard doesn't speak like a soldier, but his stillness is louder than any alarm they've ever heard. It's deliberate, a choice, like waiting for a song to end in a room full of people you don't quite trust. After the patrol, Rick walks to the back of the security office, past the small, cluttered kitchen where his partner makes a cup of instant tea, the steam fogging a small patch of the window. A cat, The museum's unofficial mouser, a sleek black shadow named Potion, sleeps on a warm server, oblivious to the fortune that surrounds her. Above them, the stars are invisible, blotted out by the city's glow and the thick blanket of clouds. He climbs a small rickety ladder to check a fuse box on the roof. He does this every night. It's not in the manual, it's his own ritual. He returns to the place where the wind has no agenda, where the city becomes a map of lights, a sprawling, glittering circuit board. Here he can feel the immense weight of his responsibility without anyone seeing his shoulders tense.
Tonight, though, he thinks he sees a car parked on the street below. A dark sedan, lights off, watching him. Or maybe it's just a trick of the light, a shadow cast by a streetlight. It doesn't matter. He knows, in a primal, instinctual way, that he's being watched. By the city, by the ghosts of the collection, by the universe itself. When you guard something this big, you don't just become a target. You become the center of a gravity well. You pull things toward you. He sits on the cool, damp tiles of the roof, the city spread before him like a broken promise. The heater is still humming below, a faint mechanical heartbeat. Shadows crawl across the ornate walls of the museum. In the distance, fireworks from a late-night St. Patrick's Day party pop and fizzle, their colors swallowed by the clouds. Someone's birthday or someone's celebration of a holiday well spent. Rick's walkie-talkie buzzes, the static a harsh intrusion, a message from his partner. "Anything?" He replies without thinking, the words a conditioned reflex. "All clear." The entrance is a small, unassuming side door on Palace Road. No grand sign, no gilded warning, just a plain steel door that everyone on the staff knows is the museum's soft underbelly. In 1982, a man from a local crew, more ambitious than intelligent, tried to hide in the museum after hours. He went in through a window he'd jimmied. He never came out. The official story was that he was caught and arrested quietly. The unofficial story, the one whispered in the back rooms of North End bars, was that he was dealt with by forces older and more proprietary than the Boston police. At 1:24 a.m., the buzzer sounds, a sharp, insistent drill of a noise that slices through the quiet office. The air in the room seems to grow cool and thick with the smell of wet pavement and unfolding history. The guards, the only two people who know this world, called the security office the fishbowl. Tonight, something is tapping on the glass. The two men on the monitor are already there, standing just outside the Palace Road door. And there's a new detail now, a detail that changes everything. They are wearing police uniforms, not pristine movie prop uniforms, but slightly rumpled, authentic-looking ones, as if they've just come off a long, wet shift. One has a thick, well-maintained mustache. They are older men, maybe in their late 30s or early 40s, men who know how to look official without making a sound. The kind of men who never raise their voices because their uniforms and the authority they project do all the talking. Rick listens through the intercom. The words swirl, slick with rain and feigned urgency. Disturbance. Courtyard. 4 minutes. The timing is perfect. The city's celebrations would cover any noise, any commotion. He files the details away like song lyrics, analyzing their rhythm and intent. Then, casually, as if it's the most routine thing in the world, one of the men mentions a problem. "We just need to come in for a minute." He hesitates. A chasm of a second opens. "Repeat that?" The man on the screen blinks slowly, patiently. "I said we need to come in. Standard procedure, we got a report of a disturbance." "It's against the rules," Rick says, his own voice sounding distant to him, the words of the manual he'd memorized. "No one comes in after lockdown. No one. Not the police, not the fire department, not God himself.
The man smiles, too slowly, a slight knowing curl of the lip. And Rick knows this isn't just a request. This isn't a procedural check. This is the final test. He stands. No anger, no outburst, just a profound, sudden stillness. The office seems to lean into his silence, the humming of the equipment suddenly deafening. "We don't want any trouble," the man on the intercom says again, and leaves the rest unsaid. The implication hangs in the air, heavier than the unsaid threat itself. On the way to the door, a shadow detaches from a corner of the office. His partner. "Ready?" the man asks, his face paled in the monitor glow. Rick nods once, a sharp, decisive movement. They never look at the guards. The next night, the motion detector on the second floor, the one in the Dutch room, will mysteriously malfunction. No alarms, just a dead signal on the board. And Rick will go back to his life, to his band, to the quiet anonymity he craved. The distant watcher in the car won't be there tonight, but a small, hand-drawn map will remain for years, tucked under a loose tile on the museum roof. A child's drawing of a palace, with its treasures flying away like birds into the night. The morning fog hangs over the fens like a lazy ghost, clinging to the bare trees and the grand facades of the old brownstones that line the parkway. The city breathes slow in the early light, a deep, rattling sigh of relief after a night of revelry. But some corners of Boston never really sleep. They just wait. Beneath one such corner, in the dark, quiet heart of a Venetian palace transplanted to New England soil, something quietly extraordinary and brutally efficient is about to begin. Two men in fake police uniforms sit in the main security office, their faces illuminated by the soft, ghostly glow of the monitors. The air is thick with the smell of old paper, floor wax, and a new, metallic tang of anticipation. They are waiting for the right moment. One of them, a man we'll call the Mustache, keeps glancing at the door, his gloved hands folded too tightly in his lap. He's the professional, the calm one. But he already knows the story probably doesn't end with a quiet retirement on the coast. Heists like this don't have endings, they just have consequences. The moment comes. A single, sharp click of handcuffs on a young guard's wrist. Two men, calm, clean-shaven, emerge from the deeper darkness of the museum's protocol. One smiles, a brief, reassuring flicker that doesn't reach his eyes. The other doesn't. They don't speak to Rick Abath anymore. They don't need to. He understands. This is it. This is the point of no return. A few minutes later, the waiting is over. The second guard is in cuffs, docile and confused, and the men move deeper into the palace, their work boots scuffing softly on the priceless tiles. No blood, no sound, just progress. This is their preferred punctuation mark. Silent, deliberate action. At the same moment, in an apartment overlooking the city, a woman sets down her phone. Her boyfriend, a junior member of a local crime family with more ambition than sense, hasn't answered in hours. She thinks about calling again, her thumb hovering over the green button, then doesn't. Maybe he's just working late. Later, she'll learn he never made it home. He was being followed, observed for weeks, his routine logged and memorized, his value as a potential informant assessed and found wanting. The thieves already know this. They are watching from a distance, behind the tinted windows of their own silence, parked half a block from the museum. Not because they need confirmation, but because sometimes, when a plan works perfectly, you need to feel the final pieces click into place for yourself. It's the craftsman's pride. Inside the car, a third man, the driver, lights a cigarette, the flare of the match briefly illuminating a face etched with impatience. "Are you sure this is the weekend?" he asks, exhaling a plume of smoke toward the cracked dashboard. The Mustache, communicating via a small walkie-talkie, nods as if the driver can see him. St. Patrick's Day. Parades, parties, music. The city will be deaf, dumb, and blind for 3 days. Bold. The driver leans back, watching the street. Or stupid. The mustache shrugs to himself. Sometimes they're the same thing. There's a pause. Then he speaks again, his voice slower this time, a low murmur into the radio. They put a new motion detector in the Dutch room last week, an infrared one, top of the line. The driver turns his head, his silhouette shifting against the streetlight. You think we're being watched? I know we are. Many people still think that old-school heists are about brute force, that you smash a wall, grab the cash, and run, leaving a trail of chaos behind. But these men weren't smashers. They were students of systems. They knew that every fortress, no matter how imposing, has a flaw, a blind spot, a place where the architects got lazy or overconfident. And for the Gardner Museum, that flaw wasn't a wall or a window. It was the front door and the human element that guarded it. But unlike some of their predecessors, they had to deal with a new generation of security. Men who believed in silent alarms that pinged directly to the police station and motion detectors that could sense a change in air temperature. And they had to deal with FBI agents who could replace old-fashioned intuition with cold, hard algorithms. Case in point, the museum's head of security, a man everyone called the Old Man. Not his real name. His real name was Lyle Grindle, but no one had called him that since he got his first uniform and started walking the hallowed halls with an authority that seemed to announce his arrival from 3 galleries away. He was cautious, proud, and disturbingly good at his job. He trusted no one and suspected everyone. The thieves hated him, not because he was a physical threat, but because he was unpredictable in the wrong way. He didn't understand subtlety. He didn't know when to be quiet. He operated on gut feelings and paranoia. And worst of all, he had a nasty habit of showing up for random, unannounced inspections at the museum on weekends just to keep the night guards on their toes. So when the thieves receive word from an inside source that the Old Man has planned a surprise security drill for St. Patrick's Day weekend, they don't send a warning. They don't try to create a diversion. They send flowers. A massive, ostentatious bouquet of white lilies delivered to the Old Man's wife, with a simple, typed card. Enjoy your weekend in the countryside. Signed, an admirer. The Old Man's wife, who has been begging him for a weekend away in the Berkshires for months, is delighted. The Old Man, who knows no one, admirer or otherwise, would ever send him flowers, is immediately, profoundly suspicious. He cancels the drill. He spends the entire weekend at home, paranoid, watching the street from behind his curtains, convinced a rival security firm is trying to lure him away from his post to make him look incompetent. He never once think to check the side door of the museum. Message received. The system had been played. Meanwhile, Abath returns to his ritual. The rooftop, the wind, the unlit cigarette. Tonight, he's not alone. His partner joins him, bringing 2 cups of tea in mismatched mugs. He doesn't ask what Rick is planning or what that look in his eye means. He doesn't need to. He just sits beside him, sharing the silence.
"You're thinking again," his partner says, the steam from his tea wreathing his face. Rick considers the statement. "No," he says, his voice quiet. "Just listening." And that somehow sounds more honest and more ominous than anything else he said all day. Down below, the city continues to breathe its slow, drunken breath. And Rick, he listens to the streets, to the silence, to the tiny, almost imperceptible noises that tell him when something's off. Because this city doesn't yell its secrets, it whispers them. And tonight, he hears something new in the symphony of the night. The faint, rhythmic thump, thump, thump of a bass drum miles away, muffled by the rain. It's subtle. Another party, maybe. Or just late-night construction. He turns toward the edge of the rooftop. The walkie-talkie buzzes once. A new message. A single coded phrase. We're in. He stares into the dark, toward the sound of the distant drum. This isn't about money anymore. It was never just about money. It's about art. The kind of art that doesn't belong in a museum. The kind that gets people erased without explanation. He slips the walkie-talkie into his pocket and walks down the stairs from the roof, slower now, measured, each step deliberate. By the time he reaches the alley behind the building, his partner is already waiting by their car. "Car ready," he says. "Main Street or back roads?" Rick doesn't answer immediately. He glances at the streetlight flickering above them, a dying star. Then back at the fan in a nearby window, still rotating on its tired, squeaking hinge. "Neither," he says. "We go to the church." His partner swallows hard. He knows what that means. That's where the old Irish mobsters still hide in plain sight. The ones who speak in whispers and move like dust. The remnants of a bygone era. And tonight, Rick is going to ask them for a blessing he never thought he'd need. Because when you're about to let the devil into the heart of Boston, you need more than a plan. You need faith. You need the old gods on your side. The Cathedral of Holy Cross isn't on any tourist guide. It's the kind of place that doesn't just hide in the city, it camouflages, its gray stone blending into the urban landscape. Tucked behind a row of bodegas and laundromats, its walls are stained with a century of soot and memory. At night, it smells like cold incense and damp stone. During the day, it smells like nothing at all. As if the place learned how to erase its own presence, to become invisible to those not meant to see it. Rick moves through the vast, empty nave, as if stepping back in time. No tour groups here, no selfie sticks. Just the distant hum of a city too busy to notice its own history. He stops before a small side chapel, half hidden behind old, dusty scaffolding from a restoration project that was never completed. A tiny, almost imperceptible carving near the altar catches his eye. A barely visible Celtic knot, the kind of subtle mark only the old families would recognize as a signpost. He kneels, waits, letting the silence of the sanctuary settle over him, then taps the floor twice with his knuckle. Quick, sharp taps. A section of the flagstones shifts without a sound. No creak, no groan, no greeting. Just an old man in a dark, impeccably tailored suit who motions with his head to follow. Rick steps down into the crypt. The corridor is cool and dry, lined with crumbling mosaics depicting saints whose names have been forgotten by the world above. At the end of the crypt, a single wooden chair sits beneath a faded fresco of a forgotten saint.
"Sit," the old man says, his voice like dry leaves rustling across pavement. Rick obeys. It's been years since he's spoken to Don Vito, not because of disrespect, but because people like Don Vito aren't part of the new world of cybercrime and international wire transfers. Their legacy, like old maps in a drawer no one opens anymore. Quiet, dependable, and only used when you're truly, irrevocably lost. "You look like a man about to commit a sin or a miracle," Don Vito says, a hint of amusement in his tired eyes. "I'm not sure which yet." "Good," the old man replies, a faint smile touching his lips. "Because God has no patience left for certainty." Rick takes a breath, the crypt air cold in his lungs. The museum is ready, the guards are in place, but the noise. Don Vito raises a single thin eyebrow. "St. Patrick's Day?" "It's not enough. The new motion detectors are too sensitive. A sneeze could set them off." The old man stands, walks to a stone alcove behind the chair, and pulls out a folded city work schedule. He holds it with a reverence usually reserved for holy texts. "You ever hear of the South Boston Parade finale?" Rick shakes his head. "Exactly," Don Vito mutters.
because that's what the city wants, a surprise. He hands the paper over. On it, a schedule. Midnight. A 20-minute, ground-shaking fireworks finale launched from a barge in the harbor. Coordinated with the police for a low-altitude flyover by the National Guard. The whole city will be looking up, listening to the sky. A memory prickles at the edge of Rick's mind. A flyover. He'd heard whispers, but dismissed them as bar talk. They do this every year for the insiders, Don Vito corrects. A private show for the people who really run this town. And if someone's cutting a priceless painting out of a frame at the exact same time, well, even God can't hear everything at once. Rick folds the paper carefully and puts it in his pocket. Don Vito leans in, his scent a mix of old wool and peppermint. Tell me, Rick, do you feel the ground shifting under your feet? Rick nods once. Don Vito sighs, a long, weary sound. Then be careful where you plant your next step. Boston doesn't forgive hesitation. Back outside, the sky begins to soften from black to a deep, bruised purple. That fine Boston mist that doesn't fall but lingers, clinging to hair and collarbones, has returned. Rick doesn't hurry. He walks with the kind of pace that says, I'm not lost, but I'm not arriving either. By the time he reaches the car, his partner is already inside, the engine humming quietly. The priest say anything useful? He asks, his attempt at nonchalance failing.
Gave me a timetable for the parade. You knew? His partner shrugs, staring out at the rain-slick street. Only from whispers. Ghost stories. A man who lets ghosts into museums. Rick doesn't smile. He left a trail this time. They drive in silence for a while, passing crumbling brick walls sprayed with graffiti that probably meant something once. One reads, "Trust only silence." Later that night, Rick returns to his small apartment, peels off his damp jacket, and stands at the sink, splashing cold water on his face. He stares at his reflection in the cheap mirror longer than usual. He doesn't see himself, the 23-year-old musician. He sees his father, not the quiet man who taught him guitar, but the one before that, the soldier who once spent an hour in a jungle rigging a tripwire so it would fall just right when the enemy patrol came over the hill. Quiet dignity, obsessive control, and above all, the unshakable belief that chaos could be managed, orchestrated, and bent to one's will. Was Rick trying to inherit that belief, or just wear it like a suit that was still too big for his shoulders? He flips the light on. The room feels better in the dark. Elsewhere, in a damp alley 2 districts away, 3 men huddle over a set of police uniforms. One wears goggles, meticulously applying an aging agent to the fabric. One wears a cap pulled low, checking the stitching on a fake badge. The third, silent, takes notes in a small book designed to be burned after reading. In their hands, the final piece of equipment, a custom-built story. Silent, powerful, slow. They won't drill the final hole. They'll talk their way through it. The kid knows, one of them whispers, his breath pluming in the cold air. A pause, and that's worse. The next morning, Rick doesn't go to the roof. He goes to a small cafe in the North End. Real espresso, old brick walls, a pastry chef who doesn't know what Instagram is. The barista knows Rick by sight, but not by name. The usual? He asks, already reaching for a cup. Rick nods. He takes his coffee outside and sits at a tiny, wobbly table beneath an awning that's lost most of its stripes. Across the street, a man in a beige raincoat pretends to read a newspaper for 20 minutes. Rick lets him, then stands, walks across calmly, and drops a sugar packet by the man's shoe. "Next time you tail me, try a different hat," he says softly, so only the man can hear. The man doesn't look up, but later that day, he's pulled from surveillance duty. Quietly, no reprimand, no promotion, just gone, like a file removed from a cabinet. That night, Rick returns to the museum. This time, it's he who's asked for the meeting. Same office, same damp air, but this time the others wait for him. He lets them gather first, lets the anticipation build. Then, with a slow breath,
He places a folded map of the museum on a dry crate. Every gallery marked, some circled, some underlined. And at the very center, the Dutch room circled in red ink.
Things are moving, he says, his voice low and steady. No, one man corrects, stepping out of the shadows. Things are about to break. Rick folds the map again, then says, maybe it's time they did. Because fixing a broken system doesn't mean rebuilding it the same way. Sometimes it means drawing a new map and watching who follows it first. The museum isn't a place that wakes, it just shifts, like a sleeping animal that senses it's being watched but doesn't bother opening its eyes. By midnight, the residual heat of the day has dissipated, but the humidity remains, pooling in the courtyard and creeping up the cold stone walls. Taxis dart through the streets above like fireflies. Young men lean on bar terraces like they're in a movie poster. Sharp suits, quick eyes, and the unmistakable posture of those who know the police are busy with tourists and drunks tonight. And in the midst of it all, there are the men in the car. They're not soldiers, not yet. They're craftsmen, specialists, ghosts in training. Men with hands too calloused for honest work and minds too sharp for it. Most of them don't know more than a few first names, but they know their job. They know which doors have silent alarms and which have none. They know how to move in the dark even when no one else is moving. And crucially, they know who signs the unspoken paycheck. Rick sees them everywhere now, even in his sleep. On street corners, refueling with coffee and donuts from all-night shops, sharing a cigarette with the kind of easy camaraderie that hasn't met betrayal yet. He knows their rhythms better than they know them themselves. He used to be one of them, not in Boston, but in a small industrial town in Massachusetts. He rode with them, watched, listened, learned. One of them, a wiry cat burglar called the Shadow, has just finished setting the final disguise. A small, shaped piece of plastic designed to make a fake mustache look real under the grainy security cameras. He wipes his hands on a rag and leans against a damp brick wall, waiting. The mustache, wearing a dark police uniform and a serious expression that sits on his face like a mask, approaches on foot. Casual, quiet. "The Shadow," he says. The man jumps, then quickly lowers his eyes in deference. "Sir?" "Easy," the mustache says. "You set the device?" The Shadow nods. "To the millimeter, just like the diagram." And the story. On the tip of my tongue, no questions. But what? There was a rat in here, a big one. The mustache studies the man for a long moment, his gaze unwavering. "Did you remember what kind?" "Yeah," the Shadow says, smiling a little, like he's just passed a secret test. "Brown, and not afraid of us." The mustache memorizes the detail. Good. He did well. The smallest details matter the most. "Is this about the money?" the man asks, his voice cracking just slightly. "No," the mustache says, turning to walk away. "It's about art." The Shadow doesn't ask what kind. Smart man. Later that day, the mustache sits in a rented room above a bakery. The smell of fresh bread and yeast coats the air. There's a ceiling fan with 3 blades wobbling like it's had one too many glasses of whiskey. Across from him sits an old forger with a crooked nose and fewer morals than a deck of cards. The forger used to make fake IDs for the big players in the 60s, back when the Winter Hill gang still wore hats to their meetings. These days, he mostly drinks coffee and complains about the price of ink.
"You remember the rat?" the mustache asks. The forger nods, not looking up from the document he's doctoring. "Yeah, brown, Norwegian. Came in on a freighter last week. The dock workers are talking. The ship was from Albania." "The woman inside?" The forger shrugs. "Could be anyone. Docks are crawling with ghosts these days. Could be Albanian intelligence. Could be Interpol." "Or worse," the mustache murmurs. The forger leans forward, his work forgotten for a moment. "You think this is about the museum again?" The mustache nods slowly. "Too many people sniffing around. It's like they think the game is about the paintings. It's about the silence." The forger chuckles dryly. Maybe it is, but the rats always follow the cheese. That evening, the streets around Fenway Park fill with crowds waiting for the parade. They wear their best green clothes, push each other around good-naturedly, and shout bets on which float will be the loudest. One of them, a plain-clothes policeman, notices Rick watching from a shaded balcony and freezes for just a second, a flicker of recognition in his eyes, then pretends not to. That's how respect moves now. Not in salutes or rings kissed, but in small, deliberate pauses that say, "I know who you are, even if I act like I don't." Rick stays there a while, hands in his pockets, his eyes scanning the crowd, not for threats, but for patterns. There's a rhythm to this city, like a song always on loop. But lately, a few notes have changed. The police are looking over their shoulders more often, the old-timers are staying inside, and the whispers, always in motion, have shifted tone. One in particular, a new player is in town. No one says a name. No one needs to, because every time power shifts, someone tests the wire. Rick leaves before the first float. On his way back, he takes the long route past the old custom house with its shattered windows and graffiti that reads, "We are still here." He walks past a vendor selling roasted chestnuts, their sweet, smoky scent a ghost of an older Boston. And finally, through the alley where a man once left an envelope full of cash under a broken brick. He kneels, pulls the brick loose. Nothing there. But now the ritual is complete. He can go back. Back at his apartment, he pours a glass of water and sips it slowly. The fan hums like it's tired of pretending to work. He steps onto the small balcony. The city spreads below him, endless and quiet, and not his. Not really. Just on loan. And in that quiet, his walkie-talkie buzzes again. This time, a voice. Unfamiliar. Calm. Male. English. "Mr. Abath, you are not being careful enough. The rat you saw had friends. The museum is one target. There are others." A pause, pregnant with unspoken meaning. And some of us still know how to send messages that don't require a tunnel. Click. Silence. Rick doesn't move. He stands there, letting the wind lift the edges of his collar. He turns off the walkie-talkie, then immediately calls his partner on a secure line. "It's real," Rick says, his voice low. "The Albanian ship." "No, worse. It's organized." His partner doesn't curse. He doesn't breathe loud. He just says, "So now what?" Rick looks out across the concrete rooftops, down into the courtyard where children chase each other between laundry lines and cracked pavement. "We listen for the parade." His partner chuckles, a short, humorless sound. "You think the noise will cover us?" It always does, even when it's not supposed to. Because in Boston, the loudest explosion can carry the quietest secret, and sometimes the road to the truth starts with nothing more than a spark and a very, very patient hand.